Hi guys, welcome. I'm Richard Wolff, and tonight we're learning how to keep your workout safe by applying 3 safety tactics that we call standard procedures. By practicing and applying these procedures to every workout, we're going to help you to work hard while keeping the workout safe. So we're going to jump right in with standard procedure number 1 here, and that is to use the MEDFITNESS clock to begin every exercise on time. Many of you are familiar with the MEDFITNESS clock, and so what we mean when we say begin on time is to simply wait for the second hand to get to a number. Once I'm at the 8, I'm of course taking 10 seconds to lift the weight up to the 10, and then I'm of course taking 10 seconds to lower the weight to the 12. And so any number on the clock is an okay starting point to allow you to manage that 10 seconds up and 10 seconds down. And this is the primary way that we keep your workout safe to begin with, by decreasing speed and decreasing momentum and reducing the risk of injury to soft tissues in the musculoskeletal system. Now, the colored numbers are there to help you remember where you started. And so that's helpful because tracking your repetitions is also one of the things that we're doing in your workout. If your trainer didn't see that last repetition, if they happen to be coaching someone on the other line right when you finished, it's important that you know how many repetitions you did. So if you know you started on the 12, each minute is of course 3 repetitions. So 2 minutes would be 6 repetitions. And so knowing where you are and where you started is important for accurate counting of repetitions. That helps us as your trainers to then know what you did and write progressive workouts and be appropriate in the progression that we're including in that next workout. So standard procedure number 1, begin on time. Wait for the second hand to get to a number, and then 10 seconds up, 10 seconds down, 20 seconds per repetition. Now, in addition to beginning on time, you need to stay on time, which simply means you need to keep your eyes on the clock. We see this sometimes with clients that begin to look away from the clock and sort of their vision drifts around the studio, and that compromises their ability to stay consistent with that 10-10 cadence. Your movement pattern varies from exercise to exercise, and the distance you cover also varies. So the actual speed that you're moving does change from exercise to exercise. So it's almost impossible to know certainly that you're going up in 10, down in 10, unless you are looking at the clock throughout the full exercise. So number 1, begin on time. Use the colored numbers if that helps you to count your repetitions so you know if you're on rep 3 or rep 4, and you communicate that to your trainer. And then lastly, keep your eyes on the clock. Don't let your eyes drift all over the studio as you're on your exercise. That's going to help you in other ways as well, but keep your eyes on the clock so you can be consistent with that speed, especially as you're fatiguing, because anyone who trains hard, and especially anyone here at MEDFITNESS, knows that as the fatigue goes up, as the discomfort goes up, the tendency and the temptation is to go faster in those repetitions. So again, this is the main way that we right off the bat keep the workout safe. Slow, controlled, consistent cadence, and reducing momentum to reduce some of the forces on the soft tissues in your body. So begin each exercise on time. The other thing I'll say about this is that when we look at clients who are keeping their eyes on the clock, focusing on the clock throughout the full exercise, they're tending to maintain a higher level of focus around their other workout skills too, which simply means that their form is generally better when they're watching the clock versus not watching the clock. They're sort of unplugging from some of the details that they should be paying attention to in the exercise. So number 1, always use the clock to begin on time. Don't just blindly begin the repetition without focusing on a number on the clock, and then stay on time as that set progresses. Number two is to maintain a neutral head and neck position. And so the simple truth here is that chronically flexing your head forward, doing this, and or extending it backwards like this during your exercises places unnecessary stress on the cervical spine and just exposes it to a risk of injury that's 100% unnecessary. Now I'm going to target 3 specific exercises here in MedFitness that we see clients frequently not maintaining a neutral head and neck. And that would be the abdominal crunch. Right off the bat, if you're starting your workout on the abdominal crunch, it's easy to, as you're flexing your trunk down, to begin to flex your head like this. And so this is, of course, not neutral. Neutral would be fist between your chin and your upper chest. So roughly this would be neutral for me. And so this is a position I want to stay in as I move my body throughout the full exercise. So trunk flexion, which is abdominal crunch, which of course, as you know, looks like this. It's easy to start to do this with your head and get in that flex position. So I want your head staying neutral as your trunk is flexing. So again here, I'm going to contradict myself just a little bit. Go back to standard procedure number 1, eyes on the clock, begin on time. This is one exercise where it's okay to take your eyes off the clock. And so as you're flexing forward to keep your head neutral, you may not want to look at the clock because that would tend to put your neck in a position that isn't neutral. So as you're flexing down, let your head go with your torso down and in, but don't flex unnecessarily down like this. So this is exercise number 1 where we see a lot of people flexing unnecessarily, causing stress to the cervical spine. The other one that we see people doing that on is the seated dip. Now this is on the B line against the wall. It's the 3rd exercise in where you're pushing down with your arms. This is a great upper body exercise, but what often happens here is people are leaning and they drop their head like this instead of keeping that head neutral, sort of looking at the clock in front of them. So seated dip is one that often goes wrong. So you want to pay attention on seated dip about keeping that head neutral. And then lastly, low back as you are extending backwards. Also on the B line, as you know, many of you like that exercise. As you're doing trunk extension, flexing back on low back, what a lot of folks do is they extend their neck and they do this and they extend it unnecessarily. So sometimes you're flexing, sometimes you're extending, but on that one you also want to maintain a neutral head. So there, what we've recently done, some of you have already experienced this, we've put an X on the ceiling. So if you begin that exercise with your eyes on the clock, as you extend backwards, your eyes should track up to the ceiling and stop at the black X on the ceiling and then come back down to the clock. So the X is kind of like a bumper for your eyeballs. You go up until you see the X, and then you come down. You don't just blindly let that neck extend back like this, and again, put unnecessary stress on the cervical spine where those structures are very difficult. If you're doing this every time you work out, it's very easy to cause chronic irritation in the neck and ongoing dysfunction in the cervical spine. So keeping your head and neck neutral is good for those reasons. The other thing that it does is it helps you to maintain proper breathing, which we're going to talk about in just a few seconds. If you're in this flexed forward position, it's hard to breathe properly. If you're flexed way back, it's also hard to breathe properly. You're influencing your airway there. So neutral is good for respiration and consuming oxygen, and that's going to be an added benefit to maintaining that position throughout all exercises. We really want you to be neutral in just about every exercise, but those 3 key ones, abdominal crunch, seated dip, low back, are where we see a lot of folks not paying attention to the neutral head and neck protocol. Now, in addition to a neutral head and neck, we want your wrist to be neutral on most exercises also. And so just like with your neck, there's a few key exercises where people tend to flex their wrists unnecessarily with heavy weights. And so what are those? The first one is chest press. So on the A line, exercise number 4, when you're pushing forward, I want your wrists to be essentially straight like this. I don't want it to be extended up like this with a heavy weight putting a lot of force on that joint. So neutral wrists on chest press is important. We see a lot of people making that mistake. Neutral wrists on the next exercise, which is compound row for your back. That's in the A line. When people pull back and they drive their elbows back, a big mistake is people begin to flex the wrists like this. So this is a lot of pressure on that small joint. So that's unnecessary and dangerous. The other one that people do it is the last exercise on the A line, which is bicep curl, where you're pulling the handlebars up towards your shoulders. People end up doing this in the top turnaround. So this, again, completely unnecessary, unrelated to the bicep being stimulated, but as you're getting up to that top, is sort of a reflex a lot of people get into to go down. So keep that wrist neutral. As you're pulling towards the shoulder, flexing the elbow, I want that wrist to maintain that perfect, straight, neutral position. Again, this maintains the safety of those tissues in the wrist. And lastly, we see this on the B line with pull down. That's the back exercise on the B line, where you're sitting and you're kind of doing a chin up. You're sitting on the seat, reaching up, pulling down to your chest. So here, same thing happens, guys. It's easy to do this. So some of you are sitting forward on that seat, and that's designed to help minimize the risk of flexing in the bottom position. Some of you are back. Either way, you want the wrist neutral. So ask your trainer if you're keeping your wrist neutral. They can give you corrective coaching along the way, but we certainly don't want to be working those muscles and then finish it off with a big wrist flex in the bottom. This does absolutely nothing for helping you on the exercise. It's just beating the living tar out of your wrists. So 3 exercises: chest press, compound row, bicep curl, pull down. Those are the big guys where we really want you to pay more attention to not flexing the wrist and not beating up those soft tissues of that joint. So that's number 2, neutral head and neck, as well as neutral wrists on those exercises. And then lastly here is proper breathing. We know that we have to breathe during the workout, of course, but there's a couple things that sometimes happen that prevent people from breathing properly. What are they? The first one is really simple: not chewing gum or sucking on candy during your workout. That immediately closes your airway and disrupts consistent breathing throughout the exercise. So rule number 1 is come in without having candy or gum during your workout. That's a really, really simple one. It doesn't happen too often, but we sometimes see that with clients, and we have to tell them this is interfering with what we're trying to achieve here. So no candy or gum during the workout. I also want you to keep your mouth open during the exercise. Now, there's nothing wrong with breathing through your nose, but in this case, when the intensity is increasing and getting higher and higher each repetition, we want to know that it's okay to consume oxygen through my mouth, and I can actually take in more oxygen through my mouth than I can through my nose. So mouth open throughout the exercise. And then lastly, taking deeper, more frequent breaths as you're getting to the end of the exercise. So as you're getting into a repetition 4 and 5, and as you're feeling that fatigue building and the need for oxygen is going up, you should be breathing more deeply and more frequently, again, increasing respiration rate, just like if we went out for a bike ride or a brisk walk, we would naturally consume more oxygen. You want to have the same thing happening here in the studio. You want to consume more oxygen, and the best way to do that, of course, keep your mouth open as well as your face relaxed. Unnecessary to be grimacing and tensing up your face as that set is progressing and you're reaching a high level of muscle fatigue. And why is this so important? We're trying to prevent any unnecessary increases in blood pressure. There's always going to be some increase in blood pressure when muscles are contracting. That's just normal physiology. We want to avoid the unnecessary increases by over gripping handlebars, squeezing them really tight, and then holding our breath and not breathing on a consistent basis. Doing that will keep you within normal limits and prevent any unnecessary lightheadedness or dizziness that could be associated with those practices. So Proper breathing is standard procedure number 3. And when we combine all these together of using the MedFitness clock to begin on time, to really set your pace of 10 up, 10 down, maintaining that neutral head and neck as well as neutral wrists on those key exercises that we mentioned, and then breathing consistently, not holding your breath, not chewing gum or having candy, we allow your body to be very safe despite working at a high level of effort, which we know is absolutely critical to get you benefits from your workout. It really comes down to the 1-2 punch here. We know that the single most important factor influencing your benefits is effort. So we want you working hard, but at the same time we have to keep the workout safe, because if there are injuries, that of course prevents you from continuing your workouts and staying with the strength training lifestyle. It really is the 1-2 punch. Maximum safety, maximum effort together to get the best outcome for you. So we've said begin on time, maintain a neutral head and neck, breathe continuously, and again, because you're supervised here at MedFitness, you can always get additional feedback and coaching from your trainer when you're in here. We're normally training and coaching these issues, but sometimes someone sneaks through and does something that we might not have noticed. And so now we're saying to you, be self-aware of these 3 practices, and you'll be able to keep the workout as hard as we need to while maintaining maximum safety. Thanks for watching tonight, guys. You'll be able to see this video in a couple weeks on our website, our learning center, which is medfitnessprogram.com/blog. Again, all of our articles are there, our other lectures are there as well. I look forward to seeing you next month.